GM friends, and welcome to the Future of Gaming. You're listening to our weekly FOGcast, and this is a special one. It's the last one of 2022, where we kiss this beautiful, kiss this year goodbye, and we say hello to a new one. In this week's episode, I'm joined, as usual, by Devin Becker. Phil Collins, our buddy's not here, but we have a fantastic replacement. We have Ste Curran. Hey, Ste.
Hey, hello. Pleasure to be here.
Great to have you. Ste runs the longest running radio show about games in the world.
Very good. I've been trying to say that successfully for 17 years. Well, obviously we weren't at the start, but at least for the last, decade. And often I claim that it's the longest running radio show in the world. And my co-host goes, and I'm like, no. There's too many clauses there. Yeah. And when we do eventually become the longest running radio show in the world, then maybe I'll be okay. But yes, for now it's called One Life Left. It's available at www.onelifeleft.com. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend anyone listen to it because it is not the best radio show about video games in the world, but it is certainly the longest running.
There you go. And so you're going to kick ass here because you have so much experience speaking into a mic and have your beautiful voice broadcasted to millions of people's homes.
Millions. Let's definitely say millions, although you would think that if it was the most popular radio show about video games in the whole world, I would call it that as well. It's the longest running.
Hey, you're having fun, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Joking aside, it is the most fun thing that I do every week, and I do a lot of fun things every week, including making video games. But it's been a regular feature in my week for 17 years, and I wouldn't still be doing it if it wasn't great fun to do this kind of thing. So
fantastic. Good. So you might hear from my coughing / my voice that I've been sick for a week, and I've been sick for Christmas for 3 years in a row now. So I don't know what this is. I think it's my body's like, I got to get through December, and then boom, when the holiday starts, first day, I fall sick. And then this morning I went for my first CrossFit session in a while, and it was painful, and so my lungs are suffering. But hey, we'll get through this. We have some spicy predictions for you. I see Devin with a smile there. He already gave us some ideas about what he's thinking about at the end of the world and stuff. So I suggest we dive right in. I'm not going to go first because I'm the boss here, so I can decide who goes first. So Devin, I think you are one of the most knowledgeable people about the Web3 gaming space. By the way, we're trying to focus our predictions about Web3 gaming. Perhaps gaming more broadly, perhaps the world if you're really feeling like it. But let's try and stay focused at least in the beginning. So Devin, give one of your predictions for 2023.
Yeah, I'd love to predict that 2023 is the year that we stop separately calling it Web3 gaming, and then it's a prediction just about gaming. But I don't think that's likely to happen, unfortunately, just yet. I mean, I hope we like I said previously about the whole calling free-to-play gaming like its own thing, and that not really ever quite going away. I would like to see the Web3 gaming thing kind of go away, but at the same time, I don't know. It's kind of a fun niche for now. But I do think 2023 will be kind of a rough year because it's going to be really slow for Web3 gaming in general. We have a lot of games that are in the works that are likely to come out at some point in 2023, either because they're just running out of money and they got to either, put out something and start trying to generate more money to keep going, or just because they happen to actually be finished. I think it's probably more likely the former than the latter, to be honest. I think a lot of these games, obviously there's the ones that are we're going to make the next MMO and blah, blah, blah. They're obviously over-scoped, but I think even the ones that are probably reasonably scoped will probably start running low on cash because they took a lot up front. And as you know, I'm sure from VC funding that some people just spend money better than others. And there was probably a lot of more extravagant spending this year. And I don't think inflation's settling down soon enough for spending to go down. So I think we're just going to start to see a lot of games start to come out maybe a little premature out of the oven, and then maybe a little disappointing, to be honest. I think we've put a lot of weight on some of these bigger games to be kind of the savior, and I don't think we're going to get a savior next year. I don't think we're going to get the Jesus of Web3 gaming. I think we're going to get some iterations at best, which is fine, as long as you take it within the broader context of things. But I think there'll be cool ideas. I think there'll be neat things like the kind of stuff that you're always excited about. You know, the on-chain stuff, the experiments. But those will remain relatively niche, I think, to an extent. But I think from our perspective, it will be a very interesting year. From the outside perspective, I think it'll be a very slow year. And I look forward to some of these games coming up, but I don't expect groundbreaking game stuff. But I do expect iteration on the economy design, which is my focus all the time. So I'm very interested to see, unfortunately, probably a lot of failures, but also a few, like, I think, inklings of ideas that work out. Who knows? Maybe Gabe Layden's big bet will finally come to, well, free to own. That was it the whole time. But I mean, I don't think that's necessarily the play. But I would like to see where that turns out.
I think that Devins predictions are probably spot on, which is cheating to a point because it's not a very spicy prediction to say that a lot of companies in this space are running out of money and are going to desperately put stuff out, and it's probably not going to work out, which broadly I would say is probably good for the space, in that I think I was talking last night with a friend about how I'm far less knowledgeable about this sector than both of you guys, but it was clear to even me when I started learning about this that there's a bubble, as there is in every new technology, when people see the money and dive in, and they don't necessarily think about what they're going to make. They just quickly go, there's a money cash grab on here, get something, so we're going to do this, plus this new technology. And necessarily, a lot of those people have to come in and then drop out again for there to be a center of that technology where the real work is going to take place. And that real work, I think, focuses in two areas. One is in the niches that you talk, or the niche projects, which really only appeal to technologists and brave explorers, right? And that's the, really, really interesting things, but they're not necessarily ever going to find a huge audience. Now, that exists in all kinds of sectors. It's in traditional gaming. It's generally where I don't know if you guys have looked at your Steam review of the year, the Spotify kind of thing, right? That comes up, and it tells you what sort of person you are, and it told me that I play games with cats in, which is absolutely true, and it told me that I play Dark Souls likes, which is true because I sunk a lot of time into Elden Ring this year, despite not liking it, right? But the other thing that it told me I play is abstract games, and the reason I play lots and lots of abstract games is because I like to feel like I'm cool and playing abstract stuff, but also because that's where the interesting explorations happen in traditional gaming, right? The slightly weird stuff which is never going to catch on because it may be slightly unfinished, or it may be a bit too weird or visually, but inside those are interesting mechanics that people take and then take into the mainstream, and you're going to see a lot of those explorations. Now, those are particularly interesting in this sector because a lot of the people who are in the gaming space who generally navigate around new technologies have been put off blockchain because they hate it and they hate everyone involved in it, so they won't touch it. So it's even more niche here. You have very few gameplay explorers putting out these kind of niche things, but some of them will catch on, and some of them will catch on in that kind of small sector and will break through. So I think that is, that's super interesting to me. The other thing you were talking about is I've completely forgotten. That's what I do on your shows, though, Nico. Is I talk about something, end up over here,
and then you lose your train of thought.
I'll
And
remember
then
again in 5
we have to
seconds.
fill the awkward silence.
No, it's not awkward. We're friends.
That's true.
It's chilling out on the radio.
Yeah.
Sorry, podcast.
That's the spicy part of his prediction, is the part that he couldn't remember.
Yeah. So I want to quantify when you say that you don't really think that blockchain gaming or Web3 gaming, whatever you want to call it, goes mainstream. Let's put a number on.
Me. No, I've got it. I've got it, Nico. No. I'm about to answer.
What a great guest! Like, stops me in the middle of my train of thought.
I like to talk. I just don't necessarily like to stay on topic. Is the other side of that, right? Is the thing that you're also alluding to, I think, which is, so there's those explorations going on, but there's also blockchain gaming as a thing that isn't called blockchain gaming, Web3 gaming, the sort of underlying technology that is slowly going to creep into bigger games, and isn't even talked about. Like, and it's not companies that are positioning themselves as we're a Web3 gaming company, we're exploring this brave new thing. It's just people who are looking at the cool stuff that this can do and maybe taking ideas from the abstract and then slowly putting them on the surface. You know, I can see uses for the tech that just do the boring stuff that a lot of people, you know, user registration or you know, account details, or, you know, keeping track of small objects, right? No one no one positions, I don't know, if tomorrow Valve suddenly pivoted 180 and said, yeah, sorry lads, we're totally into blockchain now, we're moving all of our Counter-Strike guns to on-chain, which is not going to happen. That's not a spicy prediction, Nico, so don't clip it out for next year. But if that was what happened, it's not really a big move, right? It's just a change in technology, and it just does a thing. And they'd be insane to pitch Counter-Strike as a Web3 game at that point. But I think you'll find a lot of companies who go, oh, actually, this would be quite useful for this. And if we can get it past the platform holders who don't like this on our platform, if we can somehow integrate this, then yeah, you'll find some of that tech secretly making its way into games.
We already see a bit of that, of people calling them just digital collectibles now, and I like those have been like, you know, the Reddit example or the Starbucks example, where they're like, let's just call it digital collectibles. Obviously, like Ubisoft started to kind of do that, but they made it way too obvious, the blockchain aspects, right? Like, and like I think they kind of fumbled that one, but they were like starting to go that direction a little bit as well. And I think that's kind of the camouflage everyone throws on is, well, everyone's cool with the digital collectible, no one hates those. And so I think as soon as you just stop saying NFT, like, then they can just do whatever they want.
Totally. And the Reddit thing is a perfect example, right? The Reddit onboarding is, it's almost perfect, right? You create a password and suddenly you have this thing. And if you can get away from even the creating a password thing, because I already have a Reddit account, I have no idea what my password was I created for this thing, right? If you can get away from that as well, no one's complaining about that. You just get a nice little picture. It's not that nice, honestly. But you get a picture anyway, and it's yours, and some people like it and some people don't, and some people don't ever notice. And I think that kind of friction-free example is, yeah, you're going to see many more of those over the next 12 months.
Okay, so your last point is that we'll see blockchain start to be used by parties that wouldn't necessarily have a pro-blockchain stance, but solving problems that are not necessarily related to game design at all.
Yeah, and I don't even know whether those things are problems. Like, they're things that there are solutions for, example, but already, but the solutions inside blockchain may give different possibilities in the future, and also may prove easier in some respect.
Yeah. Okay. And so I guess it's hard because once this starts solving problems or allowing for solutions that couldn't exist before, we're going to really start having difficulties with calling games Web3 games or non-Web3 games, right? And so I guess what I want to do now is also talk, because a lot of the people here are interested in like the Web3 applied to games, like and game design and game dynamics. So let's, for argument's sake, say that today we have 1 million MAUs, monthly active users, that are playing Web3 games, just as a baseline number. What's your order of magnitude number for the end of this year? The end of next year. So the end of 2023. Devin.
I'm not sure I completely understood the question, to be honest.
So assuming that today we have 1 million players, right?
Okay.
Are you thinking we'll have maybe a 5x amount of players at the end of next year? Are you saying it's 1x? Or are you saying it's 0.5x?
I'm saying maybe a stealth 2x, where it's not super obvious. I think there'll be a lot of obfuscation of the technology, like what we were just talking about. And I think a lot of people won't realize they're participating in the technology because they don't care. We will hopefully move past that whole environmental argument, because none of this is really built on Bitcoin for the most part. And so I think once we kind of like throw all these dumb kind of fake arguments out of the way and just like, let the technology kind of do its thing and ignore it, I think we'll maybe go to a 2x with its stealth. I think the people that are using it very obviously might actually go down a little bit, because right now it's like a lot of people that are still a little bit of speculative behavior or very bullish, and then they start to kind of just get distracted over time and kind of veer off and do their own thing. There'll be like a lot of diehards that are still just going to use it, and I think a lot of them remain, but I feel like that's like a 0.75x for the diehard Web3 people, and then yet we still end up in a 2x total because of all the people using it without realizing it. And I think overall this discussion of like enabling things that you couldn't do before, I think is a red herring. I think the idea of thinking of it as it has to reinvent everything, this has to be like the fusion reactor of all this stuff, that's just a distraction. Like, that's an easy straw man to go up against, right? And like that becomes the constant argument between quote unquote traditional game developers and like us newfangled Web3 nuts or whatever, you know, like it's a nonsensical thing. It doesn't have to happen, right? And a lot of this stuff sometimes does happen in big spurts where I think, for example, microtransactions were one of those things that didn't necessarily like, it was, you know, Apple enabling their little payment system in the phones, and it was just like not a big deal. Like no one thought, oh, this is going to reinvent gaming. But it's like as soon as people like took some twists on it, it started to like evolve towards something. And I don't think anyone, I mean, I know there was some debate about the horse armor thing, you know, back in the day, but like, I don't think everyone thought like this is the future of all gaming. Like there were some people who were like, oh, this was, but it didn't need to reinvent everything. It's like iterative. And we don't think, I'm not like Gabe Layden where it's like, oh, Web3 is going to replace traditional gaming. That stuff's on the way out. It's like, no, we didn't replace console gaming. We didn't even replace handheld gaming. Like we didn't replace any form of game. We just added more. I mean, I still see people playing games that are basically still old school text adventures and BBS games. We haven't replaced any form of game since Pong even. I think there's still Pong around. Hell, I have this little tiny game thing right here that I got for Christmas. That's like a full-on game system that you can code for. That's like this tiny little thing with like asteroids and stuff on it. We're not going to replace any form of gaming. We're just going to add new ones. And so let's stop thinking about like, oh, it's got to be used to replace everything. So sorry, it was a bit of a tangent, but I'm just getting a little annoyed at people constantly seeing it as this, it either is replacing everything or it's useless dead weight and stupid waste of money.
Tangents are good because Nico's original question is not fair. Like, for a start, again, trying to set both of us up for a year's time where we say, here's a number and you're going to get that number wrong. So, and also to a point, it's a very difficult question to answer because do you consider, for a start, the point that you made about what is engagement with this technology, right? Loads of people are going to engage with it and not know they're engaging with it. And secondly, I want to get into this argument, but what is a game? Like, if you take the Reddit example, if you are registering for a Reddit avatar and then you've got one and then you're like, oh, I want to get all 10 of these and collect them and want to have, you know, all of these traits and blah, blah, blah. Am I playing a game? I would argue, yeah, you pretty much are. You're collecting these things. Do you know that you're engaging with a Web3 game? Probably not. Do you care? Definitely not. Like, you know, so I think you could pick any number and it would be wrong and it would be right for next year. Your point about like getting rid of games is absolutely correct. Like replacing games is a silly thing to say. We're not going to write anything off. And the other point about like looking for the next thing, there is constantly within traditional video games, and there has been for as long as I've been a video game creator and before that a journalist, where is the next Tetris, right? Where is the next and designers sit there and puzzle over like blocks and how do I array these and like I want to, you know, Tetris has been invented and then people build SKUs and build layers on Tetris and corrupt it in this way and take a part of Tetris that you don't really think about, I don't know, the tidying up in Tetris and turn that into Animal Crossing, plucking weeds from your town every day. That's kind of Tetris-like. You don't go away and say Animal Crossing is the next Tetris.
It's like dinosaurs, right? We never really got rid of dinosaurs. They're just alligators and birds now and stuff that is still around, but like we just think of them differently.
Constant evolution, changing, mixing things together, and that is how we build new things, not by going, oh my god, we've invented this new technology, what is a Web3 game, right? Well,
the Web3 singularity.
Yeah, it's probably a load of buzzword nonsense used to raise money. Like a Web3 successful Web3 project looks at the technology and goes, okay, what can I take from this and mix, with something that already exists to create something new, or something interesting at least.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair. Like how Steve just took 3 minutes to shit on my question and then also not answer it in the same way.
Yeah, no, perfect.
Sounds like a good setup.
Done this before, Nico. Are we bullying you? I'm sorry.
It starts to feel like it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to expertly do the same thing. I'm going to completely shift gears, and I'll make a prediction of my own.
Nice.
So you can shit on that, Steve, next if you'd like.
Perfect.
And so my prediction is that I don't know if you guys have seen some charts of countries, the amount of blockchain users, and the percentage of the population. And so number one country in the amount of blockchain users by far is India right now. And if you go down a list, you have like countries like Nigeria and a bunch of Southeast Asian countries. And so I think that the dark horse for like sudden tens of millions of blockchain
You're
game
sniping my next
adopters.
prediction.
Sorry, man. Front ran.
Go ahead.
Is going to be specifically India, because they have like, I think a highly educated like general population. And so, but also like some of the other countries, I am very interested in Africa as well. And so I think, we were used to thinking about tier one countries a lot. And I think, we're going to start thinking about some of these other countries and other continents as well, significantly. And I think that's going to start over the next 12 months. Devin, you were going to say the same thing, or
sort of similar, yeah. Like my dark horse is just Asia in general, which India is part of. Like I just think Asia is gonna go big but I don't think we're gonna hear about it so much in our white-centric, non-Asian cultures that we're all sitting in. We'll only hear about it if we're looking for it. Like a lot of stuff that happens over there because of language barriers and stuff like that maybe just doesn't percolate over here. And I think just the average person's not going to hear about it. And then all of a sudden, like maybe 2024, we all realize, like, holy crap, they've been doing this for a while. Like they know what they're doing. And you see the setup for it. You see stuff like, Oasis. You see stuff like Clayton. You see these blockchains being built, game-centric. Like these countries have been building games for a long time on the forefront of different kinds of technology, different like ways of adapting to different economical issues, like the way they ended up shifting towards free to play for different reasons, microtransactions. Like they've been on the forefront of a lot of this stuff for a while. Like I mean, I'm not to say like they're always the bleeding edge, right? Like it's back and forth and we influence each other, but I think they're very confident in it. It's not like it doesn't seem like it's a bubble to them. It seems like, hey, there's cool stuff here, we're gonna build it. At the end, like it doesn't sound like a wishy-washy VC throwing money around like Joker and the Batman kind of situation. It's just them being like, we like this technology, we're going to build on it now. And then we'll see the fruits of that. Maybe just a little bit 2023 as they like build out, the first wave. But I think they are definitely the dark horse, because like not all their stuff will necessarily make its way over here, because not everything fits our cultures. And I don't know where you're at, Steve, so I'm just assuming you're in some European country probably, or America. Just totally being racist, I guess. But I imagine, it will shift westward, put it that way, later on. And not all of it will. And I think that's normal for video games in general and just game technology. Like, if Nintendo brings stuff over here, like it can make its way over. But like if it's just something that culturally doesn't necessarily mesh well over here, like a lot of stuff doesn't. Like I was even just doing recent research into MOBA stuff and just looking again at the recent kind of spread country-wise. And like what you're talking about, Nico, a lot of non-first world countries adopting this stuff. I mean, and like just Western culture in general, like being excited about MOBAs, but our adoption of it is so low. It's like it's too complicated for Western audiences and stuff like that. And I see that kind of thing all the time. Like I was just recently in Tokyo and looking at the games over there, and it's like they're all so complicated compared to like what we have over here, and walls of text, and it's just stuff that's not acceptable over here culturally. And I think we'll see a bit of that wall next year when some of these games go over there, and like people will poo-poo them because they'll be like, oh, because it won't fit over here in theory, right? Because they're building for their demographic, for their culture. And so it'll be like cool and futuristic to us because we'll get it. But I think a lot of people will just be like, nah, whatever, like, and ignore it.
I mean, 20 years ago, the traditional gaming market laughed at dating games, which were a big deal in Japan, and people aren't laughing anymore at dating games, right? I mean, they are. They're also laughing at them, but they're also making a ridiculous amount of money in the West. And you are seeing traditional gaming companies in Japan getting, not feeling the pushback that they're having, that Western gaming companies are getting from this space, and so they're starting to dabble. If you look at what Square are doing now, how much of that dabbling is going to be interesting, I don't know. At the moment, it seems to me to be centered around the NFT space, and that kind of thing, which seems to be old school Web3 thinking to me, ironically. But I think not to not just because I don't want to bully Nico on this, but I think that's a super interesting point. Yeah, and I'm not going to push back against your spicy product. I
think a good example of this, is the one thing that always excites me, because I'm just a big trading card nerd, is they still make trading card based arcades over there, like arcades that print out or distribute trading cards. You can play them there. And to your point about like dating games taking forever to come over, like they tried to bring those games over here for a while, and like the only one you could kind of see around was like Injustice arcade, like with the DC Heroes ones. But then Minecraft Dungeons came over, and that made a big splash. I don't know if it's still like making. I haven't been to Dave & Buster's to check that in a while, but like they're slowly pushing it over here. And like Sega's big first blockchain game is based off of one of those, where like you put trading cards down and you move your units around like an RTS kind of game. And I was literally, like I said, just there, and like they have new ones. It's not an old thing that they've given up on. They've been doing it for like, I think almost 2 decades or more now. Cause I think I remember playing one that came over to GameWorks in Vegas like 20 plus years ago. But I mean, like that fits with the NFT space, right? Like you're saying like, well, maybe NFTs are old, but like that's a core philosophy to what's exciting about it to them. Even you look at Animoca's philosophy and stuff, the idea of ownership of these pieces of a game, I think is core to what they find exciting about it. And so I think going forward, as kind of you pointed out, Steve, like that'll be the core of their interest. It won't be all the technology that they probably don't give a crap about on-chain games and all that stuff, right? A lot of the technology is not what they're excited about. They're excited about ownership of game assets and what that means. And they've seen that for over 20 years in the trading card arcade business. They know that market.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting, because actually I've only read these reports of what these Japanese devs are doing through the lens of Western media, right? So the reports on it that say, oh, this famous Japanese creator is dropping 1,000, 1,000 content NFT collection for use in this game. And I'm like, oh man, this is the pitch that I was reading about 12 months ago for games here that I don't believe in, doing mini NFT collections, because that's a good way of them raising cash for their thing, and they haven't really thought about the implementation. But you're absolutely right. I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought really not about that, but also how I'm getting the information about that, which is in 2 ways. 1, through that, and 2, through the lens of people on my Twitter stream absolutely loathing the fact that their heroes are now getting involved in Web3.
They love collectibles over there. It's a cultural difference.
Yeah.
Like you go there and like collectibles of everything and IP distributed through collectibles, and lots of crossovers and different like collaborations between them. It's a very different culture. And I think, as you point out, like it gets filtered over here, and unless you like dig into it or literally go there, it's very easy to miss out. Like even just trying to find information about these trading card arcade games can be very difficult. Like I feel like I go over there and I see totally different things than I can find out when I'm over here, because like when you Google, unless you're Googling in Japanese, you won't even find the websites. Like I Google for the website when I was over there, and I would find the website for that arcade, and then I come back here and I try to Google it, and I can't find it because I'm not Googling in Japanese characters. Right. And it's just, there's even like this technological culture gap, because the language is not, it shouldn't be a language barrier, because Google Translate works pretty well, but it is at the end of the day.
Yeah, but if you can be the Western dev who takes some of these principles and translates them for the audience. I don't mean literally translates them, but finds out what is, because we're all humans, right? You can talk about cultural differences, but those cultural differences generally translate to something that releases the same endorphins and makes me want to engage in the dating game or whatever it is. If you can be that person, then there's a lot of creative mileage there, I think.
Working on it.
There we go. Another prediction here. I think, because we just touched upon it, I think that, so over the past year, I've actually looked at quite a few businesses that are trying to involve community and in general players into IP creation in some way. And I think that there's a lot of ways this will be done ineffectively. But I think in 2023, we will see some cases where suddenly, like, the players and users and community is in a very productive way involved in IP creation. And I think that's going to like spur a new wave of platforms that are built around that. It's a wild one.
Yeah. I think
there's a lot of people disagreeing with this, so this is probably my spiciest one.
I think, from my experience at these communities, there are incredibly creative people involved in them, and people who are finding their own creative outlet through being enabled by being told, hey, you have control over this IP, or you can do whatever you want with it, you can make something with it. And that, that intimidating thing of having a blank sheet of paper and being told, hey, you're a creator, you can do anything you want. And suddenly it says, no, you can do anything you want involving this IP, and you've got a start point, and then you can go off and write your own fan fiction or create something beautiful or art assets around it. And that, I think, is great, and I've seen incredible things come out of the communities that I'm involved in based on this. However, what I would say is, as a creator, I am very wary of averaging out everything, trying to appeal to everyone, but also getting everyone involved in something. I broadly believe that democracy doesn't work. Clip
Spicy
that one
take.
out.
Yeah. Boom.
I don't mean that, right? Like,
No,
but I do mean that from creative projects. I think that you need. It doesn't have to be one person. Like, it could be two, or it could be three. Like, I don't necessarily believe in the auteur thing, but I do believe in creating a vision and sticking to that vision and creating something beautiful and exciting and something unpredictable. And you don't really get unpredictability from averaging stuff out. So I'm not saying that you are wrong, but I am saying that
which is British for I'm saying that you're an idiot.
No, I'm saying that I'm not sure that I'm personally keen on a future where everything is built by everyone for everyone.
Yeah.
I think that way leads a universe of Marvel movies. I don't want that.
No,
It's a
I
multiverse of Marvel movies.
Yeah.
I think, well, to just give a quick response to that, I think what you've, like, when I mention my points, like, you form a vision about, everyone helps out and it all averages out. And I don't think that's the only outcome of a world where communities are involved in the IP creation, right?
Yeah.
We were working with a company, it's called 555 Comics, based in Japan. And they have these characters that tell their stories through social media. So they have like TikTok and they have their Twitter account, and like they tell their stories, and then people can like answer and like retweet with their comments, and like that's algorithmically gets involved into the story creation. And there's also some opinionated selection there where you have these writers that are involved in the process and that select what gets implemented. And so I think these are types of implementations that find the balance between having a core group of people, individuals that have the core vision, and then still getting enough of the involvement to make something that is truly unique and special.
It is hard though, isn't it? Because I think you can listen to the voices of your community, and you should, but to a point, Devin's shaking their head. But I think that some of my favourite moments in media are moments that would appall people if they were put to a vote, like killing off favourite characters and that kind of thing. And it's a really bold move. Like, as an author, right? Like you write the ending to your book, and it's one that's going to like rip the heart out of your audience. The character that they've been taught to love through, chapters 1 through 10 dies in chapter 11, and if you put that out to an audience, or even if you listen to people, what's going to happen is the person in charge of your community listening to that has gone, listen, they will hate us for doing this. They will hate us, and it will drive our company into the dirt, right? And the vociferous people in that community they will tell you they're going to drop out and they hate you and you're doing the wrong thing. And I get that that's not entirely what you're talking about. What I am saying it is a potent thing that you have to be really careful with managing.
Here's my take on it. I think it's important to embrace the idea that fragmentation is natural and desirable. And what I mean by that is, if you have a system where it's majority rules, right, which is technically the only way to do like the best, for like compromise for the majority of people, right? Like, and that's how we do a lot of things. At the end of the day, you're still ending up with a lot of people unhappy, right? And over time, those people that are unhappy should fragment off. And I think that's a natural thing that should happen. And you should have this cycle of fragmenting and majoritying and minoritying and fragmenting. And you see that like in all futuristic fiction, you always have like the main people, and then the people that are the people that are shoved out to the wastelands, and then that whole back and forth thing. And I think if you embrace that and consider that a natural part of like these democratic systems, where let's say you open up your IP, right, to a group of people, and a bunch of people do a bunch of stuff with it, there will develop pockets of fan bases around individual things. And at some point that might become like a minority and a majority at the same time, like a really, really popular minority that the rest of the people hate because they feel like it doesn't fit with the IP. And then those people fragment off into their own fan base and then create their own kind of spin-off, and maybe even strip off the IP and redo it. And like, we see this happen all the time. And I think that's a natural part of evolution of community created content, is to embrace that. Don't try and keep everyone in one box. Say, let's create this thing. Let's get the ball rolling. And if you want to run off and do your own version of it and create your own community around that, just do it. Like, and we're not going to restrict that. Like, I find it like funny watching like the UGC idea around something like Axie, right? Where they're trying to manage this builders program and build within this kind of really constrained box. They're trying to be like open to it. Community does everything for us. But at the same time, they don't really, the community doesn't really decide. Like, there's voting systems, but again, that's majority rules, and there's going to be people who are unhappy. And I think like this idea of wanting to embrace the cyclical fragmentation, just like the way we have like revolutions that turn into dictatorships, that turn into revolutions. Like, I think if we look at it that way and stop trying to do one size fits all democracy stuff, I think we'll be in a better place for these UGC programs. Like, I've been watching some of these open licenses and stuff. Like, I was following it in like the tabletop RPG world, because I thought it was really interesting, where Dungeons and Dragons had its own license, and then that was like, somewhat controlled, right? They control it a little bit, like they decide kind of to some extent what's acceptable to be put on their stores and stuff like that. Whereas like the Swedish company that did Mork Borg and Cyborg and stuff, like just were like this open license. Like, as long as you're just not like creating this horrible content, just do whatever you want. And it's funny to watch. Like, again, just like with anything else, there's a minority of creators and a majority of consumers of that stuff, right? And some of those consumers eventually can be inspired enough to create their own thing. But a lot of times creating your own thing is somewhat based off of rejection of the thing. Like, I'm going to fix the thing that I didn't like about that thing. And that inevitably creates this fragmentation, because they are rejecting some of what's there. They're not going to just take everything and yes and it. It's going to be that. And I think it's really cool to watch this sort of like culture experiment in the RPG world, because the RPG world is unique in that it has embraced UGC in the sense that they're selling like a system or a platform, and by you creating content for that platform, it still brings people back to the platform and the community. But at some point, you'll see people fragment off, and some of those Mork Borg expansions will turn into their own game, and then they won't be supporting Mork Borg anymore. They'll be their own fan base and their own thing, because that's Mork Borg itself comes from other stuff that was like that, right? And it's just, I don't know, there's a long way of saying it's just evolution of communities should be taken into the scope, and not just this kind of like, let's just have everyone vote, blunder into kind of like mentality that like is very utopian idealistic and not at all what human history has shown.
There we go, Nico.
Let's
Devin
see.
doesn't like voting.
Oh.
Cut that one out. That's
voting.
prediction.
You
End of
think
democracy.
democracy doesn't work, and then Devin doesn't like
Yeah.
voting.
Yep. There we go.
America was meant to be a republic, not a democracy, and they were very clear about that. But apparently, we've lost our way. I don't know. Now,
So-
who knows what it is?
I don't know what I expected when I pressed record for this podcast. I'm not sure if I expected to get to this point, but anyway, let's continue. I'll
want it
throw out
spicy.
another one. I've been banging on the whole Unchained gaming drum for a while, and I think 2023 is the year where the Unchained gaming nerds are going to be cool. Are going to be the cool kids. There's not going to be mass adoption. Like, there's not going to be it's probably not even going to be more than, like, let's say 50,000 players playing these games. But I do think that more and more people are going to be seeing this, get excited by it, and start building on it. And so I think that's I guess my prediction. So we'll see more excitement around these games, especially from people who are building. And because there's always this delayed effect of people actually engaging with these new technologies, and it needs some time for that to come to fruition and result in any significant higher number of users and or money spent. I think we won't see any drastic number shifts when it comes to these games themselves, but I do think the mentality around is gonna change, and I'm gonna be laughed at slightly less when I shill my my passion for Unchained games.
I hope so, but I think you're early.
Yeah, I think you are. I think you're early. I think that that's a good thing, and that you are not wrong to say that it will get cooler, but to a point that is the least spicy prediction because it couldn't get less cool. So
I felt that.
So amongst a certain audience, right? And we should caveat that by saying 99.9% of the world doesn't care about that coolness. They don't know what it is. But what I'm talking about is, again, my Twitter stream, right? Like, I have seen in the last 12 months a couple of people going, hey, I hate that world, but here's a cool thing, right? And that is amongst, again, 10,000 tweets going just, I hate that world, right? So it's but there are these tiny, tiny dots, and I think there will be a few more of those, because as the money drifts away and those people all leap onto AI or whatever the next thing is, like, suddenly you're left with, like I said, like I said in my ramble at the start, the experimenters, and those are the cool kids. Like, and from that will grow something bigger and something more interesting. Now, whether it ever becomes cool or people just don't know they're using it, right? And the cool kids get to go, ha-ha, and you get to go, ha-ha, I was right all along. And everyone's like, Nico, we don't care. Whatever. I'm having fun with my accidental Web3 game. Then, it kind of doesn't matter. But if it makes you feel better, then I agree with your premise. It's going to get cooler.
That's what I came here for. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
I'd love to agree with your timeline, but as someone who's constantly too early and thinking stuff will happen, I got to say, like, I think eventually you'll be right to some extent. Like, I don't think it's going to be like the way that internet nerds were suddenly like cool when .com happened and stuff like that. Like, I don't think we're going to get that kind of wave where like the on-chain people are going to be driving around in Lambos like, what up, everybody? Like, you all thought I was stupid, but I bought this Lambo on-chain. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do think, like, you're right, like, eventually. But I think I would love to say 2023 is the year, but I think you might be a little bit early on that. But I do think actually the opposite will somewhat be true as well, where going along the lines of what I was saying about hidden Web3 technology, I think also there will be a lot of, like, Web 2.1, where it's there will be a lot of stuff where the and you hear this all the time in pitches, I'm sure, like, the Web3 stuff is optional, right? Like, it's very optional, and I think that is kind of necessary right now, unfortunately. Like, we would love to just shove everyone, you have a wallet now, you're in Web3, like, get used to it, throw them in the deep end. Like, we would love to just do that to everyone, but that's not going to fly. And so I think it's going to be like one toe in at a time for a while until all of a sudden people are like, oh, this is fine, and then just jump in, right? Like, but I think we'll see a lot of stuff where the chain stuff is optional. It's maybe disguised, especially with Apple's policies, where you've got to kind of hide it. I think you'll see a lot of people doing stuff that has just this Web3 is like this hobbyist extension of that. Like it's something you can do. It's something maybe you want to do if you're like this very specific niche audience of the game, but you're not like, that's not the core audience. And I think you see that a lot, especially in the mobile direction, where they all want to design these mobile games where Web3 people could participate. And I think like Fate and Arena was still like kind of a good example of that, right? Where technically the core gameplay and everything about it could just, Web3 could not exist in it, right? And it'd still be the same game. The Web3 stuff is optional and also not very well designed, but that was because it was relatively early. But I think that's an example of like stuff we will continue to see. And I think there's a lot of those being built right now. I mean, I know there's a lot of those being built right now for a fact, but I think we'll see a lot of that next year. And I think we'll see a lot of the Web3 optionality make people, I think, a little bit more okay with it as well. Like you have like one aspect where it's just disguised and people don't know they're doing it, and the other aspect where they don't have to engage with it. And I think as we kind of come at it from those two sides, it starts to eventually sneak up on everyone, so that 2024 can maybe be the year where we start to kind of like pull the curtain and like people could be like, oh, actually that was kind of cool. Those digital collectibles were kind of neat. Like I did like owning it and being able to trade it, that kind of thing. It's like, even Steam Marketplace was kind of an interesting like thing where people were like, what the hell is this? Like at first, and over time it didn't necessarily take over. Like it doesn't run, like Valve isn't based off the Steam Marketplace right now. Like it's very much still like games you're buying. And I mean the marketplace is in like the tradables, not like buying games off the storefront. The storefront still is the majority of Steam. People aren't like, oh my God, I've got all these trading cards from participating in the holiday sale. Like I'm so excited now. Like I'm an early adopter of this new tech. Like that's not happening, right? CSGO skins were a bit of a thing and stuff like that. But I think it's kind of ingrained to the point where we just don't care anymore. And that's also made it okay. Steam in general is like that, right? Like I remember just completely rejecting Steam when it first was like talked about and announced. I'm like, you want us to rent games and you're just going to like control everything. I don't own anything anymore. Like this sucks. And now like I have like, an infinite Steam library backlogged forever. So, it can flip even like, futuristic people like myself can still be skeptical of the stuff. And then you end up flipping later. And I think 2023 is kind of that tween year. Where people are just slowly getting crept up on with that. And the Unchained stuff will absolutely, to your point, Nico, be cool in the basements, right? Like the underground D&D club kind of like basement thing, and it'll be building up, like for sure. Like I think among that audience, like it will get cooler. Like people will come up with cool new ideas, and like it'll be all this like neat stuff people build on top of it. But it's just the average person won't hear about it, which is fine. Like if you're in that crowd, I think like if your worldview is just obscured and you don't see what else is going on, and you're just heads down in that world, it will absolutely look like that world's blowing up and getting crazy next year, but it just won't escape the basement as much. Unfortunately, I'd like it to, but let's be real. It's a difficult technology to make really good. And so it's going to take time, unfortunately.
Good. See, we haven't really heard
sort of.
Instead of you guys shitting on me, let's hear something from Steve that maybe we can get a shot at disagreeing with.
I don't have any spicy predictions for you. The end. I
picked the wrong guest.
Well, to be fair, like you messaged me last night. You said, by the way, we're doing spicy predictions, which is
So you had a whole night to reflect.
Yeah, you've got to give me more than
nightmares
a night to
and everything.
Get the spiciest prediction. I think the least spicy prediction I can make is something that I've mentioned already today, which is something I'm sure you're all aware of, which is the pivot of everyone from Web3 and blockchain to AI, because that is the next hot thing, which is going to change the world. And to that end, I've spent my last 3 weeks, a little longer, playing with the tech and trying to understand what I can do and creating some small game experiences from it. It's been super interesting, like really, really genuinely enjoyed it. I've been working over Christmas of my own volition, like just because I found it so exciting. In the same way that you're talking about, like I think many of the cool kids next year will be doing this with on-chain technology, still finding all of the new things. What we're going to see next year is a similar grade of ideas around AI which is people shoving AI into 1 billion games where it doesn't belong. Which, to be fair, is what I've been trying to do over the last couple of weeks, is just experimenting. Go, hey, what would this be like if I added AI? And I'll tell you, it's slightly worse, is the answer, generally. So we're going to see a lot of that stuff next year. Is that spicy enough for you?
I can dig it.
Do you agree?
I do agree, yes. Yeah, I live in a bit of a VC world where we like to try to preempt some of these waves. And I mean, the wave's clearly there, and I'm not making the shift necessarily in a major way, but I'm definitely paying attention. And I'm gonna be interested in seeing the over allocation of funds to this new space.
Oh, absolutely. You know,
And I'm also ready to be made fun of as a VC
Yeah.
in the next year for all the shitty projects that were funded, like in the last bull run in the crypto space, right? Because as Devin mentioned in the beginning, a lot of those are seeing the end of their runway. They're gonna come out with subpar products because they had to cut staff, and yeah, we're gonna be made fun of, and that's fine. That's part of the game, you know.
It's all in good fun, Nico.
That's it.
I think you're one of the smarter ones in terms of that stuff. So I think you're safer than some of the others who will be laughed out of the room first. So don't worry, you'll be further down the line. We'll get to you eventually.
I said in the previous podcast that we are happy to invest often in boomers who are extremely conservative, and we're actually looking at a boomer right there, Ste, who has a beautiful amount of runway. It's just phenomenal. And it's one of the reasons why he has such a fantastic smile on his face.
So I was at a dinner with Nico just before Christmas, and it's a dinner
That's why
full
he's sick.
full of founders. Well, I heard that people did get sick there, but vegetarians like me did not. So, which maybe was payback for what happened at the start of the evening when everyone was mingling and mixing. Other founders and various friends, the great and the good. And I sat down on a couch with Nico. And it's that point where Nico should be introducing and saying, here's Steve's got, phenomenal idea. Here's how his company works. You should be very excited about it. What Nico actually said was, this is Steve. Do you know what my favourite thing about his project is? And the woman said, no, tell me. And he said, the runway. And I was like, that's a bit of a neg, Nico, honestly. Like,
I mean, unless you're investing in airports or something, then it makes a little more sense.
That's actually it. I'm working on a startup which is doing new runway technology so it is going to change the world. No, it is. It's a nice thing to have time and space to build, which is going to be, I think, the most important thing for companies in that space over the next few years. Because I've always said, right from the start when I first met you, Nico, that I think the important thing is to allow yourself time to learn from the mistakes of others, to watch the industry grow and watch where it's heading, because technology fads come and go, right? Like, you are the cool kid or you're not the cool kid, and it kind of doesn't matter. Technology doesn't. When something is invented, it is invented and stays around. And, to a point earlier, everyone is always like, how is this going to change the world? Well, not everything has to change the world. Some things just have to improve the world a little bit. And if you can be the ones who work out how this improves the world and improves games and improves other things, doesn't, invent the next Tetris, just changes things just a little bit. If you can be the company that's there and make something cool with that when everyone else has got bored because they're not the cool kids anymore, if you can be that company, then you're in a good place. So yeah, you weren't wrong to introduce me in that way, because maybe the favorite thing is the runway, and
Survival.
for positive reasons.
Right. You're a survivor is what he said. He said Steve is smart and a survivor, and he squirreled his nuts away for the winter. And that's important, because I'll see him next spring, whereas all those other squirrels that didn't won't see them again.
Quite. The other thing that happened to me in the last month was slightly anxious emails from VC after FTX saying, so just checking in on you, just where was your money? It was in a bank account where boomers like us should put your money.
How beautifully boring of you.
Should send him back a picture of your mattress. Just
Some gold
no
bars.
text, just your mattress. Don't worry, we're good. I slept on it.
Fantastic. Good. That's it. So, Ste, our special guest, thank you so much for joining. This was really fun. And
Thank you so
your
much for
insights and
inviting
your stabs at me. I can live with it. We're still friends. I'll invite you again. Maybe next year.
Thank you. It's been super, super fun. Thank you, guys.
Devin, thanks for joining as usual, and for your hot and wise takes with your knowledge about the space. But most of all, thank you, listener. I feel like I need to do a special outro because this is the last episode of the year, but maybe I don't necessarily have to. But next year, we're going to be back with spicy takes, deep dives. Maybe we'll get Ste on, tell us a bit more about how he looks at Web3 technology, what he's doing with it. In
he's got the runway to be here again. Huh? He's got the runway to be here again. So
yeah, exactly.
No rush, Nico.
That's true. Good. And then, we've also, as you might know, listeners, started to do weekly town square meetings where, we're just talking together about topics, and you get to ask me questions and I get to ask you questions. And those are really fun. So if you want to join those, please make sure to get into our Discord. And if you enjoyed what we talked about today, if you want to support us, just leave us a like, a good rating. It helps a lot. And with that, we are out for this year, and we look forward to speaking to you in the next. Ciao.